Hey YouTube, DDR Guy 300 here again. I wanted to do a discussion video that on a topic that Rudy kind of touches on in one of his latest videos on alpha investments. The title here is Please Ship Magic Cards Carefully, but he eventually actually gets into another topic having to do with kind of the market and how it's changed. He doesn't say this, but this is what the discussion video is about. But he talks about how the market kind of is right now with people buying certain condition cards and then a large group of them being dissatisfied with them, like if you order near mint and you get like light play or mod play, or if they even show up, high TCG player. I don't know why that site is so sketchy, but kind of is. um, but the point that I wanted to discuss here was he talks about, like I said, groups of people who get frustrated on both ends of the spectrum, whether they're buyers or they're sellers. If you're a buyer, like I said, and you order near mint and you get a version of a card that obviously has some kind of play, you might be dissatisfied, especially if it has a lot of play. And then, of course, if you're a seller and you're selling a card that's a certain condition and you believe it to be so, um, and it gets to the buyer and they're dissatisfied, and then you just get frustrated by that situation. There's two things going on here. First and foremost, the main thing that's happening is over the last couple of years, I'd say, really over the last like 12 months, because the collector's market has just exploded. Oh, by the way, this is going to be a little bit of a crossover of Magic the Gathering and Yu-Gi-Oh, but just a tiny bit because I used to play Yu-Gi-Oh and still do collect that mainly. Um, so with that in mind, there's two things going on here. There's over the last, let's say, 12 to 24 months, but more like in the last 12 months, there has been this shift in purchasing behavior, I would say across the board, where people are buying in a different manner than they have been in the past. Primarily in the past, you're buying, most of the people you're selling to are buying the cards to either just throw in a collection because they like the card, um, or to play. And that has shifted from that being the primary target, I'd say, of people buying, let's say, largely near mint. Um, it has shifted from that thought process to most of I'd say 80-ish maybe percent, 80 to 90% of people who are buying near mint anything are buying it to flip it, whether it's short term or long term. The intent is to flip it when the price increases. And you have to keep that in mind. As a seller, you have to kind of evolve with the times and be aware of that when you're listing something as near mint, because the kind of people that are going to be attracted by a near mint listing are the ones that are hoping that it's going to be near mint. And because they're wanting to sit on it as some kind of an investment, like I said, whether short term or long term. And when you send something that's less than that, that's why there's so much more of a backlash than there would have been, let's say, in the last 12 to 24 months, or even before that. That's why people are in general create more of a fuss when they get something that isn't in the mentioned condition. And Rudy actually touches on this principle in his video. He's talking about boxes that he bought from this one gentleman who wanted to get out of the game. And the example he gives is if you buy a box for $80, a market price of, let's say, 90 at the time, or 100, or even just 80, and you're just literally buying it as an investment. And well, no, let's go with the 90/80. No, let's go with the 80/100. So let's say someone buys a sealed booster box of something for like $80. That's market price of 100, and they get it, and it has some kind of significant defect where the corners are damaged, or maybe the plastic is perforated in some fashion. Um, the person who buys it, the person who's buying it as an investment to sell for later, if we're talking sealed product, it's usually much further down the road, unless you just got it on Ultimate Masters and are flipping it like mad. Um, when it first came out. But the person who gets it is looking at it as a future investment. So you have to understand that kind of mindset when you're shipping near mint to mint condition stuff and selling near mint to mint condition stuff. Because in the box example, okay, you bought it for 80 at a market price of 100, and it comes to you in some kind of damaged fashion. So it knocks the present day value to maybe like 90, 85, 80, something like that, to where it's still in the realm of fair when you're looking at it in a vacuum, but projected out, let's say 5 years, and this bull market in Magic continues, and that $100 box from 5 years ago is now worth $500, but you got it, in some kind of a dinged up fashion, which is going to force you to then, if you're selling it, then you're going to have to you're going to have to say, here's what's wrong with it, and you're going to have a price that reflects that. So it could be, you have to list it for 400 or 350 or something like that. So it's the future, it's the affected future value of how things get to people that affects how satisfied they are with them now, because everyone and their mother is are buying things as future investments. I even do that myself. I buy singles all the time from TCG Player and like Troll and Toad, which I'll get to in a second. And I'm buying them 90% as, I'd say 80% as something to flip in the future. Maybe the other 20% is just collection, but 80% of it is some sort of speculation and some kind of investment type mentality. So as an example, when I buy near mint on TCG Player, and for some reason it happens a lot on here, when I buy near mint on TCG Player, I'm looking at some of the cards right now that I've gotten from sellers, and I get, I've got one card here it's got a little bit, and here's kind of the thing you have to keep in mind to kind of not be a piece of garbage when you're doing this. If you order near mint and you get something that would grade an 8 from PSA, that's near mint. You can't be ordering near mint and expect 9s and 10s to be coming in the mail, and if you're not, you're just, F that, and you're just going to sit it back. You have to, there has to be some boundaries. So I'm looking at, I'm looking at a couple of these cards that I got from this one seller, and one of them has like a tiny bit of edge where you could call it very light play, and that one I'm a little more lenient on. But then, and keep in mind, both of these I bought it's near mint. But then there's this other one that's got like a lot more edgeware than that first one, and it's like, this is clearly light play. And for when you list near mint, you gotta make sure they're near mint. And if you're not gonna make sure they're near mint, if you don't want to spend the resources on that, one of the here's where it gets into a little bit of Yugioh crossover. One of the tournaments that I actually went to recently for Yu-Gi-Oh! I hadn't been in forever. Basically, it was a YCS tournament. It stands for Yu-Gi-Oh! Championship Series, and it's this nationwide, or actually worldwide, kind of tournaments that take place that are just open tournaments, and you can go there. There's coverage. There's vendors. There's players. They're basically, depending on they're either record breaking or just like very big regional style tournaments, is how I would describe them. And I went to one that was like within like 3 or so hours of where I was, that was a fun day because I had to work third shift, so I really just went for the pre-registration day, so on a Friday, just to kind of get a glimpse of how the culture is based on when I kind of fell out of it or decided not to really go to events anymore. And it's basically evolved the way I thought it would, so it wasn't really a wasted trip. I did buy a few things. I made a trade, but that's a ramble for another video discussion. But one of the sellers that was actually there at this tournament, they told me how the way they list all of their items on TCG Player is they list them all as light play, And I thought that was really interesting and really smart because that was really interesting and really smart because they recognize that when you list near mints and they get to people who are especially crucial of the card quality, it's going to cause more problems than is worth the price difference that they would make if they listed what they believe to be near mint as near mint. And I thought that was actually kind of a really smart business decision because they're actually just making it so that the return rate is far less than it would be if they weren't if they were listing everything as near mint. And what it actually does, it's really kind of a smart business move because it's saving them, the manpower of going through everything and, you know, deciding, is this near mint? Is it light played? Is it moderate played? And they're just kind of blanket selling everything as light play. Um, and I just thought that was a really smart business move, and that's one of the things you have to kind of consider if you're going to be listing things in the fashion you're listing is when someone's buying near mint, the implication is that the seller has taken the time to, look at the card and decide for themselves, does this look like near mint or does this look like light play? That's basically, I feel like, the biggest issue of online buying is that near mint into the light play category or just near mint in general to the not near mint category because again, most of your clientele is going to be some kind of person who is going into it as either a long-term or short-term investment mentality, and how it gets if it gets to them in a way that's significantly different than what's listed, that's affecting their future return, and they're going to be dissatisfied about it. It is what it is. It's kind of the modern age we're living in when, everyone, like I said, everyone and their mom is an investor in something now, in these card games, Yu-Gi-Oh, Magic, and even Pokemon. Um, and it's something that sellers kind of need to take responsibility for, and especially the smaller ones, because it's like the grading scale in TCG Player, it's right there. It's telling you wherever the heck it is. I mean, it's somewhere here that tells you how you should be grading cards and how they should be looked at based on what's wrong or not wrong with them. And you have people that will just send you light mod play cards when you order near mint. Like for example, not to call out anyone on this, but I order from Troll and Toad all the time. And they send me, I would say, 20, I would say at a minimum 25% of everything I get from them is light play to mod play. And granted, I order mostly Yu-Gi-Oh from them. And just a little tangent. This is something that they need to fix. All right, let's see. Dark Magician. Let's say one thing Troll and Toad doesn't do that they need to fix is, let's see. I'm sure there's something here. Okay, all right, here's a good example. One thing that they need to fix is for Yu-Gi-Oh, for Pokemon and Magic, they have near mint, light play, mod play, heavy play, damage. They have the TCG player's style of, what a card's um, what's the word, condition is. Okay, but and they have that for Pokemon and Magic, but for Yu-Gi-Oh, they don't. It's just they either have near mint or they have played, and they need to really start making it so that they have these subgrades, so that they become more aware of what their product's condition actually is when they put it away. Also, I think they need to dump like a few $1,000s in penny sleeves because the way I get some stuff from the warehouse, it's almost like, I don't know what it looks like inside of there, but it's almost like all of their cards are just jostling around in the same compartment raw with no protection whatsoever. And you can put penny sleeves on everything and be fine. But whatever, that's just my 2 cents. But anyways, that's something that Troll and Toad needs to end up doing, is start doing these subgrades between near mint and played. Because, like I said, I order from Troll and Toad all the time, and I say at least a quarter of all of my orders, on average, sometimes they're all fine. Sometimes a lot of them are not fine. Um, but I'd say on average at least 25% of all the stuff that I order from them come in a condition that is definitely not what I bought. I got, I had to send back, 5 or 6 cards from one of my recent orders because they were just so obviously not in near mint. I'll be ordering like ultimate rares that just have nicks in the corner, scratches across them, damage to the sides, and it's just clearly not near mint. There was a couple cards that I ordered from some third-party sellers, like they have your cheapest trading card games. I'll order from third-party sellers, actually sometimes because it seems as though you have a better chance of actually getting something near mint when it's listed as near mint when you're ordering from a third-party seller, because of when I order from the Troll and Toad seller here, for example, it seems like a little more often than in the other cases, I'll get cards that just have something clearly wrong with them, but they sent it anyway. Um, and I'm grateful for their liberal returns policy, but at the same time, they really just need to, and all sellers everywhere, which is I guess the point of this ramble, is that sellers should kind of be vigilant in adjusting to the new era of commerce with trading card games, because the clientele is very much more largely the investment type people that are buying from you when you're listing something as near mint. So, um, that's my 2 cents on that. One, I wanted to give not a shout out, because really he could give a shout out to me. That'd be more helpful, because he's got all the subscribers he needs, and doesn't need help getting views. But one YouTuber who people have mixed feelings about. He's mcole40. He's a Yugi tuber, and he does market watches. But I mean, they all do. Most of them do. Some of them do. Anyway, he's one of the primary market watch YouTuber people who will do like 2 or 3 a week, and I do like his content insofar and on the market watch side. Insofar as he's very real. He does not have a problem calling out the market on their batshit crazy decisions on what to buy out, and he's not. He sees the lunacy for what it is, um, and calls it as he sees it, because it doesn't matter what he says, people are still going to be buying into these games and trying to turn them into like commodity style investments. That's what these buyouts are. But every video, whenever he sees something that's clearly beyond the price point of reasonable and a normal level of sanity, he'll call it out and talk about it. Like, for example, this one card it's a secret rare DD Assailant from Dark Revelation 4. Dark Revelation 4, for the Magic people watching this, is a set that was just very sparsely printed, and the secret rare reprints that are in it are, part of it has to do with a popular format that gets played in Yu-Gi-Oh, which is called GOAT format, and that's part of why this kind of price goes up. But then you compound that with this investor type mentality, where everyone's just buying to flip or investing to flip in the future, and you have this one card that, even at the height of GOAT format's popularity, might have hit $100, like $80 to $100, as like, that's like, and that even today would be like a reasonable price point considering the age of the card and what it's used in. That's a reasonable price point to ask for this card, of like $100 for a near mint and they're all unlimited. There's no first editions, but that's a reasonable price to ask for this card. And yet, right here, you've got the lowest near mint of $500. Someone might come in and list one for 300, and it's like, oh, $200 off. But even then, it's still like so incredibly ridiculous of a price. And he will, when he goes and talks about a certain card, um, that he sees that's actually a reasonable price, he'll mention it, and you just kind of hear in the background the people that are just thinking about going for it now and buying it to flip it for an exorbitant amount of price. But whenever there are cards that come across the market that he thinks are a legitimate, reasonable asking price for what it is, he talks about it. And whenever you see the kinds of listings that are just clearly, you were the investment type that bought it for pennies on the dollar to flip it for an exorbitant amount of profit, that's what these kinds of prices are. And, it's, again, I think I want to make, I might make a different video. I am going to make a different video at some point talking about how the investor market or the investor clientele is trying to turn the singles market into more of a commodity market, rather than just some game. And what I mean by commodity market is where you're trying to take something and morph it into something else, where you're trying to take what is a collector hobby kind of pastime and transition it into this commodity market where people just buy and sell and buy and sell and buy and sell in little profit increments to try and get ridiculously high priced cards to grow over time. And that's what I see, MTG, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, that's the direction they're heading. And that, again, the point of this video is the kind of clientele that you're having to deal with that you haven't had to deal with before when you're listing something as near mint. And sellers need to be aware of this, especially if you're a small seller. You have the time. If you're a small seller, you have the time to look at your little stack of cards and go through them and decide for yourself, okay, is this near mint or is this light play? And if it's light play, listed as light play. If it's near mint, listed as near mint. Um, and as far as the bigger sellers go, you have to do the same thing, but you can also consider doing what that one vendor did at the YCS I went to, which was saying how all of their cards on TCG Player they list as light play so they don't have to deal with that issue. And that's another thing that I like about MCole40 right here, another thing I like about Robbie here, he will, a lot of it, when he does his market watch, he does it as, he will highlight light play as kind of what the market price is, unless it's a big collector card or a collector type card or a meta card that's where the price difference between kind of unlimited and near mint. Oh no, he actually does that more for first edition and non-first edition. But if it's in the realm of playable, he really will just talk. He will highlight the light play. Right, that's what I was getting at. He will highlight the lightly played condition cards as, this is fine to play with, and it is. And then sometimes, depending on the card, he will go and see what near mint is and the difference in price from near mint. But again, those are usually the higher collection cards. Anyway, I'm rambling here. And he's right. Like, light play, that's all you need to be able to actually play the card and enjoy the game and participate in the game itself. But what you're getting, even if you're dealing with someone who isn't necessarily buying for a collector reason or an investment reason, even if you're not dealing with that type and you're actually dealing with someone who wants to play the game, if they're buying near mint, they're also buying it as kind of an investment, but not in the same way, because they're buying it as if they're getting it to play and they're buying as near mint, they're saying to themselves, okay, I'm clearly going to be playing with this expensive card, but I also want the most return that I can get, so let me go ahead and get this near mint. So even with that client, like if they want to sell it or trade it off or something, where they want their return to be not return. It is a return on investment, but there's also a function of enjoyability or playability that you've had with the card. So let's say you play with something for a year that was a $50 card, and now it's 25 because a reprint's announced, or 20 or 15 because it's got here. You want the person buying the near mint who's going to play with it wants the highest return possible when they're ready to cash it in and not use it anymore. And they're going to still have a similar mindset where if they buy a near mint and they get like a light play or a mod play, maybe not as much to the degree as the investors and the flippers, but it's still going to be there. And that's something that really sellers need to just be aware of going forward in the modern day trading card game climate, where if you're listing something as near mint, it needs to be able to get to the person as it needs to be at least like an 8 on the PSA scale, because an 8 on PSA is near mint. 9 is mint, 10 is gem mint. Most people know this. And if you purchase a near mint on TCG Player and you get something that will grade an 8, you should be okay with that. You should I can't remember if I talked about this already. I probably did. But you should be okay with that. You should not be expecting 9s and 10s from a near mint listing, because an 8 from PSA is near mint, and you should not suck it up, but it's like that's something that you've bought that isn't going to then lose value, because 8s, when you get 8s back from PSA, most of the time you'll break even or maybe do slightly better than the average market price. It's only when you get to like 9s and 10s that you're doubling and tripling and quadrupling your money, and you're not going to get that from near mint listings. Otherwise, most people wouldn't list anything as near mint. They just send it off to get graded themselves, unless it's like a meta card and its days are numbered. Because like if for instance, as a Yu-Gi-Oh example, let's say you got an Infinite Impermanence, which is a ridiculous $100 secret rare card that you need to play in the meta. You're not gonna send this off to PSA as soon as you get it, and then, oh look, I got a 10, now I have a $300 card. No, you don't, because that card's gonna age out, and it's gonna be $20 someday. And what you then, even if you have the 10 from PSA, you're going to have a $20 card that's a 10 that you're going to be able to ask for, if you're lucky, that $100 that you put into it initially. So, long story short on that little ramble, no one's getting meta cards graded. They're getting the more vintage, cycled out cards that are either gaining value or have hit their floor. They're getting that's what's getting graded. Okay, so that's about all I got for this video. Again, I just wanted to talk about the buyer's market and how that's kind of changed over the last year or two, and what sellers, what sellers need to be, that sellers need to be aware of that phenomenon, especially you, Troll and Toad. You really need to get on this subgrades. No more just near mint and just played, because number one, you send played cards to me so often when I order a near mint that it's ridiculous. And you need to get on those subgrades, and for other sellers to just realize that that's the kind of person that is going to be buying from you 80 to 90% of the time when you list something as near mint. And if it's not near mint, you just need to be aware of what could happen because of how people's buying habits and behaviors have changed the last 12 to 24 months. And again, as a buyer, I would say be a reasonable pain in the ass. If you buy a near mint and you get the near mint and it could grade an 8 or maybe like a high 7, that's near mint. Don't be expecting 9s and 10s, like I said. But if you're buying near mint and you're getting, significantly lightly played and mod play and damaged and heavy played, that's when you have to speak up, because like I said, as a seller, it's your responsibility to act appropriately in the new buyer's climate or seller's climate, depending on how you want to see it, um, so that you don't have those kinds of issues when you're selling something and when someone gets a card. But again, like I said, to be the broken record that I am today, apparently, as the buyer, if you get something that's going to grade an 8, accept it. Don't expect 9s and 10s. You're not going to get them. Just be pleasantly surprised when 9s and 10s get to you. That's all I got for this video. I hope someone learned something or took something away from this. Yeah, that's all I got. I'll got other ideas for videos that I touched on in this one that will hopefully go up soon, but could be tomorrow, could be a while. I guess we'll see. All I got. DDR guy out.